Hello YouTube, my name is Courtney and welcome to my channel, Courtney and Books. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm stuffing things in my mouth once in a while when I'm doing this video because I'm just starving. I'm trying to get this video done before my fiance gets back. He had to go on a business trip for a day to California and he's on his way. He's like an hour away, so I wanted to get this out of the way. Anyways, today I am doing my top 15 books that describe my reading personality or my romance style. Books that define me and my style and what I like and the tropes that I like. I'm gonna make this quick or quick-ish, because all or most of these books have been mentioned on my channel before. So if you want more information about them, just go surf through my other videos and you will find it. But for now, I'm just gonna be snappy because I'm super hungry and my fiance is gonna be back soon, so let's get into it. I'm just gonna start with the first one on my list, which is something that I read very recently, and it's a trilogy by Heather Guerre. I'm hoping there's gonna be more books in this trilogy. It is an alien romance trilogy or alien romance series called the Forbidden Mate series, and I could not choose which book I loved the most, so I decided I was just gonna kind of disperse the books throughout different lists that I make on my channel. And today I'm just gonna mention Moonstruck, and Moonstruck is number 2 in the series, and it features Hadiza and Errol. So this is the book series, or a book that is about humans having already been very established in the universe. It's very far in the future, I'm assuming, and humans inhabit or colonize many different planets in the galaxy, but there are still species that they don't know about, like still alien species that they don't know about. Even though they have relationships with other alien species, there are obviously ones that they've never heard of. And we have what I think are called the Skavens. It's an all-male race of aliens, and they are able to mate with pretty much any other alien species, but all offspring that they have are born male and Skaven. So they have sort of like this weird tool at their disposal, and that is that their bodily fluids act as a extreme aphrodisiac to females of other species, and humans in particular have a very strong reaction to it. It's almost like they black out practically and just go into like this sexual frenzy. And so we have a group of human women who have never known or never seen these aliens before, and they've been kidnapped in order to be sold or auctioned off to Skaven males looking for mates. The other side of this is that humans in particular make the Skaven males react very much the same. So when you get two of these like species in the same area, they literally cannot resist each other, and it's, you know, hold on, come on, up. My cord is in the way of my dog's like little chair, and she was looking very sad because she couldn't jump up. It's actually against the law in general to just mate with humans because you can never really know if it's consensual because of the way that they react to each other. We have Hadiza, who is a doctor. She's very smart. She's a military doctor, so she's seen a lot. She has some PTSD from some of the things that she's been through. And we have Errol, who is what is called an enforcer, which is kind of a Skaven policeman who goes around trying to uncover and trying to dismantle these trafficking rings. He gets her at auction in order to save her, but these two end up having to be in very close proximity to each other while they are traveling, or while they land on this planet to get his ship fixed because it is damaged during their escape, I believe. Sometimes there are certain things that my brain doesn't retain, like certain pieces of information that my brain doesn't retain in books when I read. But they are stranded on this planet. They have like a hotel, and they're there for an extended period of time while somebody is trying to fix his ship or make him a part that he needs to fix the ship. So the story is really about them trying very hard to resist each other, even though they are basically irresistible to each other. The steam was top notch. Like, and I've mentioned this many times before, but when it comes to alien romance, I've read so much of it, and a lot of them are so very similar in that, you know, 90% of it is about abduction, fated mates, shortage of females, things like that. I felt this was different. I was really happy to find that it wasn't a fated mates situation and that their physical attraction to each other was something that they resisted for a very long time until they didn't. And in that time that they were resisting each other, they were able to get to know each other and basically fall in love without the physical aspect of it. And I loved that so much. I know I said that I was going to try and keep these descriptions like really short and clipped, but I'm not very good at that, so hopefully in editing I can find a way to cut some of this out. Anyways, number 2 on my list is Beautiful Desperation by Raven Wood, and it is a bully romance, and it is contemporary, it's college. I've mentioned before that when it comes to bully romance, I love bully romance. It's one of the tropes that I just is to die for, in my opinion. I love it. But it has to be people of age. I cannot read a bully romance that is set in high school. I just can't. I can't relate to that. There's no way. It has to be people in college, new adult, something of the sort. And then I will eat it up like candy. I love it. Anyways, Beautiful Desperation is a college bully romance, and this girl gets a scholarship into a university. I forgot what the university's name is. And one of the founder's sons goes to this university. You can, if you know bully romance, you know where this is leading. He is the prince of the school. He's untouchable because his father is a founder. One of the things that he enjoys doing is getting all of the other students to basically worship him, and all the new students kind of go through a hazing process. Our main character, Isabella, refuses, like you would expect in a bully romance. She refuses and therefore captures the attention of the head of the school, our beautiful boy, Alexander, who is just untouchable. It becomes this whole situation where they're kind of at odds with each other, and then he's making her life a living hell. And eventually she starts to chisel away at his hard bully exterior and finds that there is a human being underneath it all. And they end up building a relationship. The next one on my list, and you've heard me talk about this book multiple times, I did an unboxing of a special edition sort of gift box that I got from the author, and I absolutely loved it. So I have the book actually in my possession, and that is Paid to the Pirate by Una Rohr. This book it was a surprise to me because I was looking for pirate romance and I honestly did not expect to find anything notable. A lot of the pirate romance books that I was finding were like sort of historical fiction, and I wasn't really into it. Her book was it was a dark romance, and it features this woman, Charlotte, who washes up on the shore naked. She has no clothes. The only thing she has is a locket that says Charlotte on it. So she assumes her name is Charlotte, but other than that, she doesn't remember anything about her life or who she is or where she came from. She ends up in a small coastal town where she kind of befriends or sort of becomes family with a bunch of other locals until one day pirates storm the shores and are demanding payment. Basically in exchange for protection and for the promise that other pirates won't come and raid their town. And Charlotte walks out to serve these pirates drinks at the tavern that she works at, and the captain, Colt, recognizes her, or seems to recognize her, and decides that all he wants is her as payment, aka, I mean, that's why the book is called Paid to the Pirate. So the town and Charlotte decide that they are going to give her over to the captain in exchange for safety. And during her time with the captain, she's going to find out what his weaknesses are, basically, and report back when she returns back to her coastal town. During this time, she starts to find out a lot of things about the captain, who seems to know her and have a past with her, but she has no idea who he is. And she ends up getting kind of a tip from one of the women in her town to pretend that she knows him. Because if he thinks that she has amnesia or thinks that she doesn't remember things, then their suspicion is that he's going to try and manipulate her into doing whatever he wants and kind of fill her head with false memories. So she starts to pretend that she knows who he is, and he knows something is up. And obviously their past is very dark and very dramatic. And so they just sort of like start this game where she's pretending she remembers him and he's pretending that, I mean, it's hard to explain, but basically, like, she doesn't remember, he does. He thinks she's fucking with him, so he plays along. It is dark, so if I know I said that already, but it is dark. There are moments of dubious consent, and there's a lot of tying up and spanking and things. So I am a fan of dark romance and I'm a fan of pirates, so I really enjoyed it. The next book on the list is Beast, and I'm not really gonna go into this at all because I have an entire video somewhere down below. I will have a link, and it is an entire video dedicated to this book. I loved this book. I felt brainwashed into loving this book, and if you read the book, you will understand why that is. Basically, we have a woman who is thrust into stardom because she won a show that is sort of like American Idol. So she is a singer and she is a celebrity. And in the background of her famous celebrity life, her father has gone missing. She's always kind of grown up feeling neglected by her father because she doesn't know what her father's business was or what his work was, but it made him have to spend a lot of time with another child who was a little boy named Javi. And it was almost like he loved him as a son and sort of neglected her as a daughter during this time. But anyways, he goes missing, and somehow Isabella thinks that Javi has something to do with her father's disappearance, but has no way to contact him. Lo and behold, our boy Javi has her entire house, who is grown up. They're both grown up at this point. It's not like a little boy bugging a house. Anyways, so he has her entire house filled with like security cameras and things, and he's been spying on her for a very long time. And for reasons unknown to the reader, he wants to get revenge on her father, who at the time is missing. So his next best thing is to corrupt his daughter. So Javi kidnaps her, and it becomes sort of a Beauty and the Beast sort of scenario where he does a lot of things. It's a very dark book. And he does a lot of things to her. He tortures her in a lot of ways in order to get back at her father, and it ends up being a happy ending. I know that's hard to believe, but just read the book and you will know why this is. The next book that I have on my list is Hold, and I read this somewhat recently, and it was recommended to me by, well, not to me personally, but it was on a lot of book recommendation videos that I watched. Hold is number 1 in the Hold series by Claire Kent, and it is a sci-fi romance taking place on a different planet. This woman, Reina, is a archaeologist, I believe, and she is caught excavating in areas where she's not allowed. So she gets sent to a super prison on a different planet, and this prison is underwater, like under toxic water, so escaping is basically out of the question. She is sent to this prison that is full of thugs, it is full of criminals, it is full of just awful, awful people, and she obviously doesn't belong there. And one of the guards kind of understands that she doesn't belong there, but what can he do? And he tells her, find the biggest, scariest man in this prison and offer yourself to him in exchange for protection. That is how you're going to survive. So on their little drive-through tour of this prison, she finds kind of the alpha male, and he's got kind of like a harem around him. It's very clear that he is the king of the prison, but she doesn't want him. She wants the other guy, who's big, scruffy guy who kind of keeps to himself. He has his own cell, and she zeroes in on him immediately. So when she gets into prison, she decides immediately that she's going to offer herself to him, and he accepts. And she is offered his protection in exchange for sex and other things. It becomes a really pretty love story where, you know, you find out that he's a little bit of a cinnamon roll underneath all that scruff and muscle. The next book on my list is Butcher and Blackbird, and I'm sure you've all heard about this because this book has been taking the book world by storm. I read it long before it was super, super popular, so I feel a little bit, you know, I have a little bit of pride about that. Anyways, Butcher and Blackbird is the first in the Ruinous Love trilogy by Brynne Weaver, and it is a story about two rival serial killers. You have Rowan and you have Sloane, and they are both killers of killers. Or not killers, but they are murderers of bad people, which makes it a little bit more redeemable, I guess, if you're reading the book. Anyways, they meet up because they are both going after the same person. After they meet each other, and this said person is dead, they go sort of on a date. It's not really a date. He just kind of takes her out for dinner. They start talking, and Rowan decides he likes her. And so he decides he's going to propose a game. Every year they are going to get a text message about a target, and they are going to both go after this target, and whoever gets the target first wins. This game kind of goes on for years until they finally decide that they love each other, or like each other, and then they decide that they love each other. It is a romance that develops over years and years of competing over people that they are murdering. And it was actually a really, really hilarious story. I found myself laughing so hard on multiple occasions. There are a lot of disturbing instances, so if you're sensitive to gore and things like that, read the trigger warnings because they are very accurate and will tell you exactly what is in the book. And if you can't stomach it, don't read it because it is very graphic. But the spice was top notch, the story was top notch, the characters were great, and the comedy. It's weird to say this about a book that is about serial killers, but the comedy was the best. I was laughing so much through this entire book and I loved it. The next one that I have on my list is Tide, which is number 2 in the All Torn Up series by Carian. I actually read this book before I read Torn. I think Torn is the first book in the series. She has written many, many books and they all cross over. They're even different series kind of cross over. You see sort of like side characters in different books. So it's worth it to read all of them, but it's not necessary, which I love. That is a big thing of mine. I love reading books that are not tied together because a lot of times I can't commit or my attention span just doesn't let me read an entire series at once. Tide is a book about a man, his name is Tyler, and he's been through a lot. You know, he's made a lot of bad choices. And a lot of those bad choices have led to him being severely scarred on his face. His vocal cords don't work like they're supposed to due to a motorcycle accident, I believe. And he's kind of beastly, to be honest. Like, he lives in a cabin in the woods, disconnected from a lot of his family, and he's very isolated from the world and from everybody. And then he's kind of hiking through the woods one day and hears something and ends up finding a hatch. And in this hatch, there is a small girl. She's not small. She's a teenager. I believe she's like 16 when he sees her. And a dog whose vocal cords have been cut. And this dog is barking, and what he was hearing was this dog trying to bark. And I don't know if you've ever heard dogs bark that have severed vocal cords, but it kind of like is this weird squeaky, like hushed sound. Anyways, he finds this girl and this dog. He fishes them out, hands her over to the police. Come to find out, she is a girl who was kidnapped at a very, very young age. I want to say 5, but that might be wrong. She was kidnapped and kept by this horrible, horrible man up until she was 16 and she was found. And 2 years later, she's been through massive amounts of therapy. She is reintegrating herself into the world. She really doesn't know how to socialize and to be a part of, you know, society because of her time being kept in a basement, basically, at a very young age. All the books that she had were like her children's books, and some of those books featured a prince coming to the princess's rescue. And despite Tyler looking like a beast, he is her prince, her knight in shining armor, and she has thought about him every day since he rescued her, but since then she hasn't seen him. So as she grows up and as she becomes, you know, more integrated into society, becomes an adult, she decides to seek him out. And she goes and she finds him in the woods. Come to find out, the dog that she hasn't seen since she was rescued, he took that dog in, and so now she's able to reunite with her dog and with him. And it becomes like this thing where he wants nothing to do with her. You know, he wasn't intending to be anybody's rescuer. But she sort of, you know, wants to get to know him because he rescued her, and she has a very, very, very difficult time connecting and, you know, building relationships with people because of what she's been through. And she feels drawn to him for some reason, and they end up building this really, really beautiful, beautiful relationship. It's age gap. It features a lot of past traumas, and I loved it so much. It was so sweet, and it's the first book by Carian I ever read, and I read almost all of her books after that. So thank you, Carian, for writing good books. Next one on my list is The Maleficent Faerie, and I have mentioned this book as well on my channel before. It is the number 2 in For the Love of the Villain by Rebecca F. Kenney, and it is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. So you have the Maleficent Faerie, who is Malik. Malik is technically Maleficent in this situation, and Malik is a male. He's very sexy. He's very gothy. Reminded me a lot of like Howl from Howl's Moving Castle, but with like wings and horns. He gains a lot of his magic from the void. It's not a thing that people do. And there are all these like different Fae nations, and they're kind of all at each other's throats. He wants to kidnap the princess because he has come up with some sort of a counter curse in order to stop the void from growing and destroying people and nations. Everyone thinks he's evil. The king and queen have spread this propaganda that he is evil, and he's kind of taken on the persona of being a villain. So he, in an attempt to kidnap the princess, ends up accidentally kidnapping her bodyguard, who is a fairy warrior. And there's a lot that happens after that. It is a romance, so you can kind of like already guess what happens between them. She's very, very feisty. One of the things that I really, really enjoyed about this book is that it is not very often where the man in a romance book is the sub, and he was definitely the sub, and there was a lot of like self-punishment that he like was going through, a lot of instances where he wanted her to punish him for things that he had done because he's kind of taken on the role of being the villain in order to save the world. So I really liked it. It was really, really different. It was interesting, and it was a really good retelling of a classic fairy tale. The next book that I have on my list is Heart of Blood and Ashes, which is #1 in A Gathering of Dragons by Milla Vane. This is a fantasy enemies to lovers book. I read this years ago. We have this woman who is literally in a tower, who is locked in a tower by her father, and it is because that she is the rightful heir to her kingdom. So there is a certain power or ability that is passed only through the females in this bloodline, and so because she is the rightful heir and her father is power hungry, he locks her in a tower. During this time, there's a lot of scheming and a lot of conspiracy and a lot of things happening, and our man, his name is Maddox. His name is Maddox, and her name is Vane. I write all the names down now so that I am not constantly saying I don't remember their name. So Maddox is coming back from battle or war. Again, it's been a long time since I've read this book. He is coming back to find out that his parents have been murdered by a enemy nation, aka Yvain's nation. So according to him, what he knows is that Yvain, the princess who nobody knows is locked in a tower and, you know, abused and neglected, wrote a letter to his parents trying to get them to come have a meeting in her kingdom. They go, they're murdered. Now he blames Yvain. When Yvain is being transported somewhere, he attacks and he kidnaps Yvain. And Yvain tells him, my plan is to marry you to gain power and take back my kingdom. And in doing so, we can be free of my father and his corruption and whatever. He does not believe her because he saw the letter that she wrote to his family or to his parents that got them killed. And so it becomes an enemies to lovers where he is traveling with her somewhere. I don't remember where. He's traveling with her, and during that time, she is trying really, really hard to appeal to him, and he starts to get to know her and starts to get to know the truth until eventually they end up falling in love. I loved it. It was a long book. It was a wonderful journey. The characters were great. Yvain is very, very small, and that's something that Maddox kind of looks down on because he comes from a nation where physical strength is valued a lot, and she's very small, weak. The only exercise she got was walking in circles in her tower room, and she's missing a couple of fingers on her hand, I believe, which I'm not going to spoil why, but there's a reason why, and she has a limp. So she's kind of, you know, exactly the opposite of what he would look for in a bride. And you know, he starts to love her because she's very, very, very smart and uses her wits and her mind to sort of compensate for the fact that she's very physically weak. And I loved it. I loved it a lot. I loved it so much. The next book that I have on my list is Edge of Aeon, and it is another alien romance story, and it is #1 in the Aeon Warriors by Anna Hackett. Again, if you don't know me, I love alien romance. The reason I loved this book, again, is because it had nothing to do with fated mates. And it had nothing to do with kidnapping women because they had no women on their planet. Those are two things that I will still read about, but they're not going to stand out from each other because they're a very repetitive plot. Edge of Aeon features this woman. Her name is Eva. She basically has to kidnap a war commander from this race of aliens called the Eons, and they are basically built for war. They're big, they're very skilled, they're very military oriented, and she has to kidnap this commander, and that is, you know, how she's gonna find her sister, I guess. There's more behind it that I can't remember because it's been a while, but her goal is to kidnap him. Ironically, she succeeds, even though she believes it to be just a death sentence trying to kidnap an Aeon warrior. She succeeds. It ends up that they are both crash landed on an alien planet. And this alien planet is a planet that the Aeon warriors use as basically a training ground. So this planet is filled with obstacles and dangers and things that they constantly have to work together to avoid. And during that time, they begin to find it very, very difficult to resist each other physically. And then because it's a survival thing, they sort of like really start to love each other. And I loved that. And what I loved even more was that I believe at the time that I read this book, it was the first alien romance book where the woman was absolutely capable and able to take care of herself. She was military trained. She was tough. She knew how to fight. She was basically very much on the same level as Davian. So I really, really liked that. She was not a damsel in distress. Their dynamic was great. I loved their relationship. Their story was action-packed, super action-packed. There was not a moment that you could sit down and breathe. It was just, there was action, steam, all kinds of things. I loved it. The next book on this list is another alien romance, and it is His Metal Maiden, which is number 3 in the Space Lord series by Michelle M. Pello. I've mentioned Michelle M. Pello before. I've actually mentioned this book in particular before because it is one of my favorites of all time. I don't think it would have been one of my favorites of all time if I hadn't read the rest of her books, because they are all standalones, but they also kind of mix together and there are overlapping characters and overlapping stories. Lachlan, he was exiled, and I can't remember why, but he basically travels space on sort of like this ship, like this ragtag team of other men who are kind of outcasts. He gets a call from his brother, who still lives on this planet of dragon people. And his brother says that I just married this human woman and she is missing a sister and has no idea where she is. And according to her, her father lost a bet in some sort of a gambling situation, and she's very worried for her sister, and I want you to find her because I love my new wife. And if you find this woman's sister, basically who is your sister-in-law at this point, if you find her, you can come back and be with your people on your planet. You don't have to travel around space in a spaceship anymore. So he decides to do it. And it sort of leads him on this crazy journey, and there's so much mystery about it, and I really don't want to give anything away, but, you know, he does find somebody, and he is instantly so protective of her, and the journey that they go through together, and the journey that she particularly has been on, it was heartbreaking, it was beautiful, their relationship was beautiful, I loved it. I love sci-fi, I love aliens, and this is a very unique story when it comes to that genre, so. The next one that I have on my list is an oldie, and this is from the series that got me started in romance books, and that is Veil of Midnight. It is number 5 in the Midnight Breed series by Lara Adrian. If you don't know the story about how I got into romance in the first place, I believe I talk about it in a video somewhere on my channel, but short story is that my fiance is actually the one that got me into it many years ago. He told me about the series called Midnight Breed series by Lara Adrian. It's a vampire romance series, and I said no, because the first ever adult romance book that I read, I did not like it. It was icky, it had no story, I didn't understand it, the characters were flat. And so I put it off for a very long time. And then eventually, after a lot of convincing, I did read the first book in this series, and I ended up loving it so much that I binged the entire series over the course of like a week or two. And there are a lot of books in it. And I loved all of them, don't get me wrong. The whole series is amazing if you are into vampires, romance, fated mates, but not really fated mates, sci-fi, because these vampires are actually aliens. And I know that sounds weird, but it's very well described or very well talked about in the book. Veil of Midnight was my favorite, and it's kind of the one that I recommend to people. This book series they are technically all standalones, sort of, in the fact that they are all different characters and different relationships, but there is an overarching story, so reading them in order is a lot more beneficial than some of the other series that I mentioned on this channel. Anyways, Veil of Midnight is number 5, and it features one of the vampires that is mentioned in previous books. His name is Nikolai. And he goes to Alaska. No, that's not the one. That's a different one. I get it mixed up, okay? Hang on. So I don't remember why he is meeting with this other vampire, but he's meeting with this other vampire, and he finds out that he has this woman, and they are called breed mates. If you are a woman that is able to, because not all women can breed with vampires. If you are one of these breed mates, that means that they're all marked because they have some sort of a tattoo or a birthmark on their body somewhere. Breed mates are able to bond with vampires and have their babies, basically. And breed mates all have their own abilities as well. So some of them can talk to the dead. Some of them can read minds. You know, there's all different things that they can do. Our girl Renata, who is basically a courtesan, but also like this guy's little assassin or something. Anyways, so he kind of owns her, this other vampire, and Nikolai finds out about it, and he at first thinks that they are breed mates. Turns out that they're not. And he ends up starting to get close with her, and she's a super badass. She's like I think she's like French, and she's an assassin. Her abilities, I can't remember what they are, but there's some sort of a telepathic or telekinetic sort of ability. And her owner, the vampire who sort of more or less owns her, kind of uses her abilities to do his dirty work. Again, I have not read this book in many, many years, so I can't go through the entire story, but I loved their relationship. I loved Renata. I loved the way that they bonded, and it was a great book. Just read all of them, but if you do read all of them, know that that one's my favorite. Next on my list is the Carnal Games, and I have talked about this on this channel before as well. The Carnal Games is another alien romance, and it is very clear that I love alien romance. I said this was 15 books that define my romance style, and half of them are alien romance, so I guess that defines my style. The Carnal Games is the first in the Carnal Continuum by Naudii Nebula, and it is a enemies to lovers, and it is true enemies to lovers. So we have Derek and Carnan. Carnan is a human, Derek is some sort of a species that I can't remember, and these two species they don't like each other. And it starts out in a situation where Derek does something very, very awful to Carnan, and then it kind of jumps forward a few years, or more than a few years, I can't exactly remember the time frame. She is trying to kill him, and they've come into contact multiple times where they have tried to kill each other. They are enemies. They hate each other. They want to see each other suffer. Carnan is waiting in like this bar on a space station or something, and she's waiting for Derek to show up. Things go sour, and they both end up being trapped or kidnapped and put into what is called the Carnal Games, which is basically like the Hunger Games, but a million times more disgusting, because not only are they pitted against each other and expected to kill each other, but they are also put in these horrible, horrible, horrible situations where people want to see them copulate. And these two species do not fit together. In their suffering, they sort of start to grow closer to each other. They start to learn things about each other. This game ends up holding things above their heads that, like I believe at some point, family members are brought into the mix in order to force these two to cooperate. And it just, you know, being captured in that sort of situation together brings them very close and eventually ends up being lovers. And I loved it. It is not often that you get an enemies to lovers book that is actually enemies to lovers, let alone aliens, and those are two of my favorite things. So I loved this book, and I hope there will be more in this series. The next book that I have is another oldie, and it is called Poison Study. It is number 1 in the Study series by Maria V. Snyder. I read this a long time ago, and to be honest, it was at the time that I read it, which was like 15 years ago. At the time, it was in the romance section of the bookstore. When I read it, I had no idea why it was in the romance section, because after I read it, I realized it wasn't a romance. There was barely romance in it at all. But I still loved it, and it is one of the things that reinvigorated my love for reading after high school. And it is a book about Elena and Valak, and Elena is this woman who is born into this society, or born in this kingdom where magic is outlawed. And I can't remember why, but she is in prison in the beginning of the book. She is on the verge of being molested by somebody, and she defends herself. And because she defends herself, she ends up hurting or killing the guy. And, you know, they're contemplating putting her to death, or her other option is being a poison taster for the king, which is somebody who eats the king's food and, you know, so that he isn't poisoned. So she would end up being the one poisoned if the food is poisoned, things like that. So she agrees to be the poison taster for the king, or the food taster. And during this time, she is being trained by Valak, who is beautiful. He's like a dark Legolas, basically. She is being trained by Valak, and I don't remember what his position is in this kingdom. Again, it's been like a very long time since I've read this book, but he basically is training her to be able to identify and build immunities to a lot of different poisons. And during that time where they are in close proximity to each other, they get to know each other, and it sort of turns into a love story, but not really. Again, this isn't really a romance to me, and the other books sort of stray away from their relationship, if I remember correctly. But it's still a really, really, really good book. I loved it. It was very dark. There was a lot of, it was sort of my introduction into more mature content after high school, because back then I was reading like, I don't know, not Ink Exchange, Wicked Lovely and City of Bones, and, you know, those books. And this was kind of my introduction into more adult content. The last book on this very long list is King's Bride, and it's number 1 in the Chronicles of Erne by Beck Michaels. This is a very loose retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it centers around Suneva. Suneva is this woman who's she has a lot of guilt and a lot of past trauma that she carries around with her. She's kind of taken up the mantle of being responsible for her family and her younger sister, and her father absolutely hates her for this past that I will not talk about because it is part of the story and you should just read it. But something happened, and he blames her for things that were lost during that time. And so he really, really doesn't like her. And during this instance where she is trying to save her brother, or a little bit of background, they're in a perpetual winter, which makes it very difficult for them to hunt for food. They're kind of borderline starving, and they're in a perpetual winter because the ruler of their territory, or the ruler of their kingdom, is this Ice King, and people don't know what he is. They don't know if he's a god. They don't know how to kill him, but they hate him because he keeps the place in perpetual winter, which makes it very difficult for these people to live. So nobody likes him. But when she is trying to save her brother from something that happens, this old woman tells her to go and get one of the blue roses that grows around the castle, the king's castle. He's gonna hate her for it, but she just feels so responsible for her family that she decides to go and steal a rose anyways, despite what it might do to her or her clan, basically. She comes back, she ends up sort of saving her brother, but in return, the king shows up and he's like, you stole from me, now I need something in return or I'm gonna wipe out your entire village. Her father says, marry my daughter, it will join our houses, it will ensure that we will always be loyal to you, and the king accepts. So Suneva is sent off to marry Jokul. He's obviously very gorgeous, and he's very magical, and he's very godly, but she hates him. And the only reason that she goes quietly to marry him is because she wants to figure out a way to kill him. And her entire purpose is figuring that out and freeing her people from his tyrannical, icy rule. And because it is sort of a Beauty and the Beast story, you can kind of see where it is leading. It is another enemies to lovers, and it is a true enemies to lovers again because she absolutely hates him. And you start to understand a lot of the lore throughout the relationship, and you understand where each other are coming from, and there are a lot of twists and turns, and I loved it. It was great, and I hope there will be more in the series. That is all that I have for you guys today. And I say all like that probably isn't a huge video that I'm gonna have to edit. That's 15 books that I think describe my romance style. There are a lot of other books that I wanted to mention on here, but you know, there are a lot of books that I enjoy that aren't necessarily in the style or in the genres that I typically read, so I didn't really mention those. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of those books or if you want to read any of those books below. Comment on this video, like this video. If you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 600 subscribers on this channel, and unlike everything else that I think I need to do alone, I cannot do this without you guys. So I hope you all have a nice day, happy reading, and until next time, bye!